Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We are going to be talking about two Chinese app groups and their recent movement against the Southeast Asian Nations Group, our association, and it's some pretty interesting stuff. Let's jump right into it. Today we are facing an unprecedented array of data breaches, hacking attempts, and surges in digital crime. Why is there such a widespread amount, and how little is noticed in our everyday lives? Malware, dark sites, brute forcing, zero-day script kiddies, and nation-state hackers are all on the rise. Learn more about the threats we face and gain a bit more knowledge than yesterday. Hey everyone, another episode of Exploit Brokers is coming to you now. Okay, let's jump right into it. And guys, please remember to hit subscribe, like if you're on YouTube, or hit follow, and please rate us if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. Help us share the show and get this information out to as many people as possible. But thank you for tuning in. Let's talk about it. So in an article by the Hacker News, two Chinese app groups ramp up cyber espionage against ASEAN countries. So two China-linked Advanced Persistent Threats, or APT groups, have been observed targeting entities and member countries affiliated with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, as part of a cyber espionage campaign over the past 3 months. This includes the threat actor known as Mustang Panda, which has been recently linked to cyber attacks against Myanmar, as well as other Asian countries with a variant of the Plug X or Core Plug backdoor dubbed DO plugs. So, Mustang Panda is a threat actor that has been previously associated with China, and they're pretty much targeting Southeast Asian countries, which means anything that might be around them. The Southeast Asian nations, it's best that I understand it kind of like NATO, but for that part of the world, but not in the sense of military, I believe. I'm not fully sure what they do, but suffice it to say, it's an alliance, right, of the countries over there. So, Mustang Panda, also called Camaro Dragon, Earth Preda, and Stately Taurus, is believed to have targeted entities in Myanmar, the Philippines, Japan, and Singapore, targeting them with phishing emails designed to deliver 2 malware packages. And this is something we see kind of often with a lot of hacking groups, app groups, just other groups in general. Sometimes the easiest way into a target or into a target organization or entity is through the people. In cybersecurity, people tend to be the weakest link, whether that's, everyone is very busy or some users just don't know. There's a multitude of ways that users can be compromised, but it ultimately comes down to phishing emails. This isn't the only way, right? There is 0 days, RCEs, and stuff like that, remote code executions. But phishing seems to be one of the most popular ways because you get a user to click. Once you get a user to click, then you can infect the network and you can do a bunch of really interesting, cool stuff, but you found your entry point in. You don't have to find a vulnerable service that's been not patched, burn a 0 day for something that may or may not be worthwhile. There's, when phishing is just the 0 day of the human, if you will, but we've had forever to fix it. So the threat actors created malware for these packages on March 4th to the 5th, more or less, of 2024. Coinciding with the ASEAN Australian Special Summit, which was March 4th to the 6th, 2024. Palo Alto Networks Unit 42 said in a report shared with the Hacker News. So Palo Alto Networks Unit 42 is a pretty prominent security researching group. They're really cool, right? They're really credible. They push out a lot of really cool stuff, and they're one of the more known commercial, kind of like Malwarebytes and all those. These are just groups that they pump out some really cool stuff. Now, the article does kind of touch on what happened and the malware zip and all that, but for a better explanation, I'm actually going to jump to Unit 42's actual report on it, because I thought it's kind of cool, and then I'll jump back to the article. So, according to Palo Alto's Unit 42, right, there is 2 main points, or 2 main things that was being delivered, 2 main payloads. Attackers created the first package on March 4th as a zip archive. Entities located in the Philippines, Japan, and Singapore saw it the next day, evidenced by the samples they uploaded to communal databases. Extracting the contents of talking_points_for_China.zip archive reveals 2 files. The executable Talking Points for China exe is actually a renamed copy of the signed anti-key logging program keyscrambler.exe developed by QFX Software Corporation. Now, a lot of the times when you rename a software and take advantage of some vulnerability it has, it's because it's generally signed, right? It's not some random exe that was compiled, and you can do this pretty much for the trust factor, right? This exe has been signed, at least you would hope. It would be signed by a legitimate company that has a legitimate reason to have a software on your computer. In this case, it's Key Scrambler, which Key Scrambler, and I'll pull it up in a minute, but Key Scrambler is a legitimate anti-key logging software that pretty much makes it harder to keylog you. And they scramble it. How they do, I don't know, but it's some pretty interesting tech. Threat actors often abuse, take advantage of, or subvert legitimate products for malicious purposes. This does not imply that the legitimate product is flawed or malicious. Upon executing it, sideloads the malicious DLL keyscrambler.ie.dll and copies it to the directory. There's a certain directory list with an auto-run registry of the same location for persistence, which ultimately means even if you delete it, if they have that auto-run registry and that file is still there, it'll reinfect, right? Persistence is one of the key goals for any malware, any virus, because if rebooting essentially removes the virus, it's going to do damage, but it's not as damaging as a persistent malware, right? So the code then decrypts shellcode that we assess as pubload malware. This malware attempts to establish a connection, and it goes on, right? So what's interesting is essentially, the way I'm understanding it is that the malicious DLL is what actually brings in a loader, which downloads stuff and brings in more malicious payloads into it, right? So it's the entry point, and this is through what seems to be talking points, or pretty much a thing to display right at this summit meeting. So, you know, whether that's quote unquote PowerPoint presentation, which it's not, but you know, it sounds like it could be, or something like that. That's kind of what they're going for. Again, the human element, right? You're going to see talking points for China. If you have a Windows file viewer that doesn't have like the extensions turned on, you might just see talking points for China, think it's a PowerPoint, open it up, boom, you're infected. The other way, there's a second package called notepso.scr. So threat actors created the second package on March 5th, 2024 as a screensaver executable, thus the SCR extension file, with which an entity located in Myanmar saw the same day, evidenced by an upload to the malware repository. Given the file name notepso.scr, we suspect that PSO is likely a reference to the title of personal staff officer, a rank in the Myanmar military. We observe stately Taurus, which again is the Panda app name. App names usually have 1, 2, 3, depending on who's referring to them. They usually have multiple names. Switching tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, for this malicious package. Instead of relying on their choice of file archive formats such as zip, RAR, or ISO for delivery, this time Stately Taurus employed an executable with a screensaver file extension for initial infection. So, Stately Taurus, or the Panda group that I mentioned, which are the same entity, you usually will use something like a zip, a RAR, and ISO to deliver a file. And a lot of the time that's to bypass some basic antivirus, right? An antivirus, I don't believe, or maybe it can, I have to go look, but it doesn't usually scan the contents of a zip file. That's how you'll sometimes get warnings where it's like, hey, it's a zip file, careful, right? So upon opening the SCR file, the threat actor attempts to make network connections to download the benign executable Windows Update.exe and malicious DLL EACore.dll. The files were hosted at this location. So the benign is a renamed Windows Update, which is actually EA Core Server, which was signed by the video game company Electronic Arts, or EA, right? They took an old version of that, renamed it, and again, to give authenticity, you see this window update.exe, and if you click it, well, it's signed by EA, and if you're not looking at who the signer is, and you're not trying to put two and two together, well, why am I trying to update a video game file on my work computer? A lot of people don't know that association, right? When they do that, in the background, it's going to sideload the malicious DLL. And side loading is what it sounds like, right? When a program loads up, it brings in DLLs to be able to pretty much to be able to do its function. A DLL is a supporting file to an executable. In this case, it's a DLL that they overwrote for the legitimate EA core.dll. So EA core sounds like it would have given some core functionality to the EA core server, right? Whether that's spinning up ports or loading some entity or doing some processing or computation or save files, whatever it was, they've overridden it. They probably stubbed out some of the functions to make it happy. And then they made it so that when you call one of the functions, their other stuff gets invoked. They can, spin up a background process or something. And now they have a persistent thread unrelated to the original thing that was wound up, but it was started from a quote unquote signed and trusted thing, which was the EA core server, which was renamed. All that to say, they're using legitimate things, injecting malicious things, and then using those malicious pathways to download stuff, which are the loaders and the downloaders. And they're using those as a way to bring in the actual payloads like the rats and the keyloggers and stuff like that. So jumping back to the article by the Hacker News, all that to say, there was also some other network traffic between an ASEAN affiliated entity and the C2 infrastructure of a second Chinese app group, suggesting a breach of the victim's environment. This unnamed threat actor activity cluster has been attributed to similar attacks targeting Cambodia. And what it is there are certain signatures, right? Whether it's the name of certain C2 servers or payloads or indicators of compromise, different things that were found. In this case, I believe it was the infrastructure, right? So the servers that they're reaching out to. If a program reaches out to, and I'm just using this as an example, Microsoft.com, then that is probably affiliated or somehow affiliated with Microsoft.com, right? If you open another program and that also reaches out to Microsoft.com, then you would just be able to assume that this other thing is also affiliated with Microsoft.com. Any piece of software that you open up and reaches out to Microsoft.com to download or verify or do something is generally affiliated with Microsoft.com. There's no reason why you would affiliate it with Apple.com, right? If it never talks to Apple. There is some other ways you could affiliate it to it, but in general, if they're reaching out to the infrastructure of a group or entity, then they're probably affiliated with that group or entity, unless they've been compromised, in which case that's another can of worms, right? If Microsoft.com has some random server that got pwned by Panda, well, then this malware isn't associated with Microsoft. It's Microsoft just involuntarily hosting malware. But that's another discussion. In this case, there's infrastructure that we can attribute to another Chinese app group, and we can just kind of associate that these two app groups are going after the ASEAN event or the ASEAN summit. To go on further, right? Earth Krahang emerges in the wild. It's a subsection in the article. The findings arrive a week after Trend Micro shed light on a new Chinese threat actor known as Earth Krahang. That has targeted 116 entities spanning 35 countries by leveraging spear phishing and flaws in public-facing OpenFire and Oracle servers to deliver bespoke malware such as PlugX, ShadowPad, Reshell, and Dinodas Rat, aka XDealer. The earliest attacks date back to early 2022, with the adversary leveraging a combination of methods to scan for sensitive data. So there's more to this, but ultimately what it's saying is that Earth Krahang they're coming out as a new threat actor, a new app, right? So think about it like the Panda group. And this is a new entity that's associated with the nation state or the Chinese government or the Chinese military arm in a way. And they are doing campaigns to pretty much do the will of the APT group or of the host nation, in which case this would most likely be China. So one of the threat actor's favorite tactics involve using its malicious access to government infrastructure to attack other government entities, abusing the infrastructure to host malicious payloads, proxy attack traffic, and send spear phishing emails to government-related targets using compromised government email accounts. Earth Krahang also uses other tactics such as building VPN servers on compromised public-facing servers to establish access into the private network of victims and perform brute force attacks to obtain email credentials. These credentials are then used to exfiltrate victim emails. So once they gain a footing or a hold into the infrastructure, they're leveraging that to do everything they can, right? They're proxying traffic, which essentially means if, say they were to infect some company or some entity in the UK, right? Now they can make attacks to other entities and make it look like it came from this UK server, because that's what a proxy is. A proxy takes data from one and forwards it or sends it to somewhere else to make it look like it came from the proxy. Think about it like VPNs, right? You get the ads for VPN. Oh, make it look like you're in another country. Proxies operate on a similar idea, except proxies really just act as a middleman versus something like a VPN lets you create a virtual private network, right? What the name implies. So you can access other resources within a VPN. Whether that's stuff that's been firewalled behind a company network. So when you connect to the VPN, you can access company servers in an intranet and stuff like that. Now they're also sending spear phishing emails, using compromised government emails, which lends legitimacy, right? If you get an email from something at gov, at us.gov or at irs.gov, then you're more likely to trust it because it's coming from a legitimate email. Granted, you can always spoof, but in this case, they're using the legitimate emails that have been compromised. Now, all this is interesting, and it's just more APT groups that are coming out and helping China. Why is that kind of interesting? It's interesting on a lot of fronts, but the last part of this article is the part that I find kind of crazy and cool. Last month, a set of leaked documents from ASEAN, aka Angchong, on GitHub revealed how the company sells a wide array of stealers and remote access Trojans like Shadowpad and WinT, aka Treadstone, to multiple Chinese government entities. So you have a company that's creating these malware and stealers and loaders and stuff, and it's selling it to the government. So the government doesn't have to maintain these products. They're just buying it and then using it for their own purposes. Maybe they might customize it, but ultimately the core functionality was developed by this company called ASEAN. And to go on a little bit further, the part that I find interesting is, let me see, I'm looking for it now. The obscure hack for hire entity has also been implicated in the 2019 Poison Carp campaign aimed at Tibetan groups and the 2022 hack of COM 100, in addition to attacks targeting foreign governments and domestic ethnic minorities, taking valuable information, some of which are carried out independently on their own in hopes of landing a government customer. So you have these entities that are acting kind of like the digital version of a private military contractor, right? So the US government generally hires private military contracting groups to do certain things, right? They're contractors. But in this case, they're acting as a private military. That's the name of PMC, or I believe they're also nicknamed mercenaries. Well, in this case, you have a hack for hire. So you can think about this as a digital mercenary or a digital private military contractor, but for the cyberspace, which is kind of starting to play out as the new war. Granted, there's actual physical war, but cyber war tends to be part of the intelligence world. So the data leaks have provided a rare insight into how the government outsources part of its cyber operations to private third-party companies, and how these companies work with one another to fulfill these demands. So it sounds a lot like, contractors. You have contract A, and then they might have a subcontract with this other company to fulfill. This company is really good at stealers and malware, and this other company is really good at obfuscation and exfiltration. So they, one might be the lead on a contract and subcontract that part to the other, or they might work in tandem to get a contract done. There's a lot of ways that contracting with government works. And in this case, they're trying to do it on behalf of the Chinese government. What I find kind of weird and concerning, and I can understand where they're coming from, but what I find kind of weird and concerning is where they carried out independently on their own in hopes of landing a government customer. So they're doing these attacks, not even because they were prompted, but because they want to get some of the government money. And that concerns me because a nation state actor has certain goals. And those goals align with what they want to do. Whether that's good or bad or malicious or not malicious or benign, it's irrelevant for this purpose. They have a certain goal that they're trying to reach, and they know how they want to do it. I'm curious if the fact that some of these are carrying out independently, they might ever do something that sounds like it's in the benefit of the government customer, but it's actually against, right? Say they're trying to be stealthy and they hijack or they infiltrate company A. And if this military contractor who wants to land or this cyber contractor, the hacker for hire, wants to land a contract, also infiltrates company A, sends off a bunch of alarms because maybe they're not as stealthy, and they've just compromised the operation of the app group that was in company A, right? Well, Chinese government tends to be kind of unforgiving for certain things. Would we see, this hacker for hire suddenly get sanctioned or fines or, penalized in some way? Because again, they want to land a government customer. That doesn't mean they have the explicit idea of what they want. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but you're doing something in hopes that they give you money without having a good guidelines, right? If you think bug bounties, they want to secure their software and they give you a scope. They tell you this is what's in, this is what's out, this is the kind of stuff we pay for. I don't know if they have that here. And it's also interesting to see that the Chinese government is outsourcing. They don't want to hold it in-house for some reason, and I'm not sure why. I guess because maybe they can burn an app group or this company whenever they feel like they're no longer a value. I don't know. I can only guess that. Now, the last part that I'll talk about with this is they have the equivalent of Pwn to Own, and they're calling it the Tianfu Cup. And I quote, "Furthermore, the publicized documents confirm that the Tianfu Cup, China's own take on the Pwn to Own hacking contest, acts as a vulnerability feeder system for the government, allowing it to stockpile zero-day exploits and device exploit code. When the Tianfu Cup submissions are in full exploit chains, the Ministry of Public Security disseminates the proof-of-concept vulnerabilities to private firms to further exploit these proof-of-concept capabilities." So they are using these events, these competitions, to gather 0 days. The Pwn to Own, if you're not familiar with it, is this contest that's held where companies come in and say, hey, we'll pay you X amount of money over this weekend if you can find 0 days on our systems. A 0 day is what it sounds like. It's day 0, which means we've had no time to patch it, no time to fix it. It's a vulnerability or a bug in a piece of software that can be exploited for the hacker's purposes, whether that's gain access, leak data, remote code execution. There's a lot of different kind of exploits. But 0 day means that the vendor or the person who maintains the software doesn't know about it. They've had no time to fix it. So it's at day 0, because once they find out, that's day 1. Now, the interesting part is for the Pwn to Own, right? In a recent article by Security Week, 200,000 awarded at Pwn to Own 2024 for Tesla hack. A lot of the Pwn to Own is you can make a good amount of money as a researcher group, right? There's 200K for Tesla, 130,000 for an exploit chain in VMware Workstation guest to host escape, Oracle VirtualBox, and a guest to host escape, which netted some researchers 90,000. There's different ways. A Chrome exploit for 60K, Safari exploit for 60K, Adobe Reader for 50K. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, Pwn to Own is a way to make some money with finding 0 days and reporting it to the vendors, who will hopefully patch it and make their software more secure. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of app groups, there's a lot of 0 days, and this stuff is only hyping up more by the day, as cyber war seems to be one of the new frontiers, and 0 days and Intel seem to be the latest digital gold. I'm curious to see where this goes, and I'll be keeping an eye on it. And guys, I want to thank you for coming in. Again, please subscribe, hit that bell notification icon, and like the video. If you're on a podcast platform, please follow and subscribe to it, give a rating. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and I will see you in the next one.